Two-thirds of Republicans today believe the 2020 election was stolen. It's very clear this is not just a fringe group. Like, where do you stand on that?
I mean, where I stand on the election of 2020 is the same place I always stood. He lost the election of 2020. I said that the day that he lost the election of 2020. That night, not a ton of people. There's some.
That actually is a really good point.
Apparently this guy's a fan of mine. He wanted me to talk about how he did.
Bad. Laxalt was not a bad candidate, but Laxalt was associated with Trump in some victory in ballot across the country. And first party to...
Why do you link me in the middle
when he
of this?
loses. Do I think it's going to be the same thing again? I don't think we saw it this time.
I mean, I disagree, but I don't want to take up any more
I
time.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, it's going to be the next guy coming on. Okay.
Hey, Ben. I wanted to get a little bit away from politics for a second and ask about what to look for in a spouse. So I'm from a... Oh, shut up. So I'm from a traditional Middle Eastern community in Brooklyn, and a lot of people that I've spoken to tell me, you know, the way you fall in love is, you know, somebody takes on certain roles, the traditional roles, you know, taking care of your house, raising your children. And then I listen to people like Jordan Peterson who will say that, no, you find somebody that, you know, you have to contend with, or Jonathan Haidt, who speaks about the progression from the romantic love period to compassionate love, to companionate love period.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess my question is, outside of sharing the same values religiously and politically, what should you look for in a spouse to, you know, ensure that the relationship will flourish after that romantic love period?
So I think that it's a great question. I mean, obviously, you named the biggest thing that people, and that is the thing that people miss, by the way, right? The way that people date is for the romantic love, and they don't think about the companionate love or the sharing of the values. So you actually took most of the question off the table, because you were like, here's all the important stuff. Tell me about the not important stuff. So, okay, so among the non-important things, but they're still important. Obviously, there has to be sexual compatibility and attraction between you and your spouse, right? That's an important thing. Pretending that it doesn't exist is really foolish. Now, when I say sexual attraction and compatibility, I would hope that you wait to find out whether there is compatibility until after you're married, right? So the idea of sexual attraction is very important. But, you know, I'm an advocate of traditional marriage, which means I'm an advocate of virginity until marriage.
Doesn't it seem kind of weird to marry somebody before you figure out, like, a really important compatibility? But whatever.
I have been my entire life. I was a virgin until I was married. My wife was a virgin until we were married. We are both happy, very happy for that. Because one of the things that it did is it actually meant that we had to respect each other as human beings before we actively became sexual with one another. We actually had to make a lifelong commitment to each other before we were going to give each other that part of ourselves. So I think that's a really important thing. You know, as far as other attributes, somebody you can have fun with, somebody who's able to handle crisis would be a really good attribute. And you know, C.S. Lewis talks about sort of the different attributes of men and women. One of the attributes that he points out is that under stress, men tend to recede. Men tend to be like, okay, I'm gonna go silent. This is what happens during stressful situations. And women tend to become more active. And so they help, right? But the way they help is by annoying you, right? And for men, the way that they help is by like running away to the man cave and brooding, right? And so finding a spouse who's actually able to understand those differences is very difficult, and if you can find it, absolutely phenomenal. Communicating with your spouse is really, really important. I mean, I've told a bunch of stories about me and my wife and how we have these sort of gaps from time to time, and one of the things I love about my spouse is that I will actually sit with her and I'll be like, okay, I'm a man, I don't understand what's going on, I need you to explain this to me like I'm a small child. And thank God she will. I mean, she's very, you know, giving that way. And I think that open line of communication is really great. Having a sense of humor, being goofy is really necessary. Life is rough, and particularly after you have kids. Kids are wonderful. I have 3 of them. They are also a giant pain in the ass, and they're extraordinarily tiring. And so if you don't have a sense of humor about your kids or about your life, it's going to be real rough. So having a sense of humor is a big thing.
Thank you.
I think this is I don't know if Ben has grown up or if I just haven't heard him talk about relationships much, but that was probably one of the only times I've heard somebody speak about the differences between men and women and acknowledge the shortcomings of both, and then give an example for a relationship for how both of them help to overcome those shortcomings. Like the red pill answer, I would expect to be like, oh, like when there's a problem, I expect my wife to shut the fuck up and sit back and let the man be the leader and blah. Like that's like the red pill answer for everything. Whereas he's like, I have these strengths, my wife has these strengths. Sometimes I need her to explain this. Sometimes blah blah blah. It was a really, really positive answer for communicating differences in marriages.
You're the man.
This will be our final question.
Okay, so I was raised very pro-choice, and now I am a pro-life advocate. I'm involved in the movement.
But Ben isn't red pill? Yeah, no, I don't think, most conservatives aren't red pill. That's like more of an internet younger thing, but. Well, I don't understand why I was linked this video. Was that a DGGer? He didn't even. It must have been the kid before. I don't know. He fucked the timestamp up, I guess. He was this person. Watch this guy. Sorry, right there.
Hi, Ben. I'm Adam. I take economics here, so obviously I disagree with conservatives on most things. I tend to be pretty left-leaning. My question is about the modern American conservative movement. So you have a famous saying, facts don't care about your feelings. It obviously drove a lot of popularity for you. Yeah, sure, I agree with that sentiment. My question is, I think polling has showed that something like 2/3 of Republicans today believe the 2020 election was stolen. It's very clear this is not just a fringe group. Like Carrie Lake, I think, was on Tucker Carlson recently and was saying that, oh yeah, my opponent is the Secretary of State. You never know, she could take votes. Obviously, I might be misquoting, but that's the general sentiment of what she said. And my question is, does that feel a little bit ironic to you that the conservative movement in America tends to portray themselves as caring very much about facts and logic, but when it comes to Daddy Trump losing an election, then all of a sudden, that's not really the case. And I'm asking in good faith because I think you said that he would destroy the social fabric or something along those lines in 2016. You said in 2020 the damage had already been done, so you were okay supporting him. And then after that, he's obviously done a lot more damage to the social fabric. So where do you stand on that?
I mean, where I stand on the election of 2020 is the same place I always stood. He lost the election of 2020. I said that the day that he lost the election of 2020. That night. Now, there are a lot of influences that I don't particularly like about the 2020 election. I don't like the media coverage. I don't like the silencing of the Hunter Biden story. I don't like the changing of the rules to allow for vast mail-in balloting, which I just, on principle, oppose. I think that people should go on the day of the election. They should vote on the day of the election. I don't like election month or election 2 months, right? But none of that is to say that election fraud was the cause of Donald Trump losing the 2020 election. It was not. Donald Trump was the cause of Donald Trump losing the 2020 election. He ran a very bad campaign, and he lost to a person who is dead. Okay, so like so you know, as far as I'm not going to answer for other people's perspectives that I don't share.
Sure, I'm just asking what you think the future of the conservative movement in this country is.
I will say
a sizable portion believes something like that.
Right. So first of all, I think that the way to read a lot of what's going on in politics right now is incredibly reactionary. Almost everything that's happening is just reactionary. If the media say black, then Republicans and conservatives are going to say white. And if the right says something, the left will immediately say the opposite. Right? We don't even share a common framework of facts at all. And so what the right will do very often is they'll say, I don't even understand why the left is making a big deal out of election denial. You guys were calling Stacey Abrams the governor of Georgia for years on end. Right? We did 4 years of Donald Trump was elected in 2016 because of Russian collusion that never materialized. Right? Like so this game can be played on all sides. With that said, I can say that I think all of that was bullshit, right? I think the Russian collusion stuff was not true, and I think that it was an attempt to scurrilously.
I really, I don't know if he's going to try to hold him to time. The Russian collusion stuff and the Trump claims of voter fraud are just two entirely different things. They're so different.
Scurrilously undermine the presidency of Donald Trump. I can also say that I think Donald Trump lost the 2020 election because he lost the 2020 election.
And so, not to interrupt, but just real quick on the Russia thing. Obviously, the idea that Trump was like this agent being controlled by Russia was stupid. No one thinks that. Or maybe some people.
Well, a lot of people at the beginning.
No serious people who are worth sort of talking to think that. But obviously the IRA was a real thing. Russia influenced our election to the extent that they organized protests and such. And Hillary Clinton conceded the election the next day. So I think there is a meaningful distinction to make between saying that Russia influenced the election in 2016. People still knew Trump was president.
Okay, so if you took polls in the aftermath of the 2016 election, you asked whether Donald Trump was an illegitimate president. Right? Not whether he was elected, whether he was an illegitimate president. A significant percentage of Democrats would say he was an illegitimate president in the aftermath.
That's such a more nebulous phrase, though, like an illegitimate president versus like Trump literally saying there was widespread voter fraud. That's such a more direct claim, right? I think when I'm looking at like the difference in the gravity of the claims, my question is going to be like, well, what is the solution that both sides are presenting? Like, what would the solution have been for Democrats to investigate to see if there's collusion, to I don't know what else, to like make sure the State Department is monitoring international communications more, I guess. Like these would have been the solutions Democrats come over. Like what is Trump calling for? Like literally overturning the election, right? There's a difference between the gravity of the prescriptions that both sides are making here that make these two claims very different from one another, right? Impeach Trump? I don't think. What was the, God, I'm trying to remember because he got impeached twice. What was the first Trump impeachment for? Was it over the January 6th shit? Because Trump didn't get impeached for Russian collusion.
Aftermath of the 2016 election. I think it was something on the order of, and I'd have to check it, but it was over 30%. Were in the immediate aftermath saying he was an illegitimate president. And that was language that was frequently used.
Oh, no, it was Ukraine was first and then January 6th. Sorry, timeline is backwards.
Aftermath that election. Again, that doesn't, two wrongs don't make a right. That doesn't excuse the saying that the election was stolen and that it was stolen in a wide variety of states using unspecified methods or any of that. I'm not excusing that. The point I'm making is that we live in such a reactionary time that people are bouncing off of each other like billiard balls. And it's a real mistake, which is why, as I've said, I think that for future elections, and this is true for both parties, first party to sanity wins. First party to sanity wins. Okay, and I think that what the election of 2022 really showed is that the American people don't like a lot of what they're seeing Democrats on policy, because Republicans won by about 4.5 points in the generic ballot across the country. And they really don't like a lot of the Republican candidates who are embracing what they saw as crazy town stuff. And it was almost a targeted strike on people who they thought were saying crazy town stuff. And this is why Ron DeSantis wins by 20 in Florida, because he was just governing in Florida and doing a good job in Florida. So he took a 0.4 percentage point victory in 2018 and turned into a 20-point election victory in 2020. Mike DeWine, who, by the way, took the exact opposite view of DeSantis on COVID, won by 20 in Ohio. Anyone who's perceived as competent in their state did really well. Anybody who is perceived as not competent or crazy or off the wall did really, really poorly. And you saw this even within states, right? Chris Sununu in New Hampshire won going away in his gubernatorial race in New Hampshire. Don Baldick lost by 11 points in New Hampshire. You saw this over and over in Nevada. Right, Lombardo ended up winning. The Republican won in Nevada. Laxalt was not a bad candidate, but Laxalt was associated with Trump in some minds, and that hurt him in some ways. Right? You see this like all over the place. And so the point that I'm making is that what people actually want from Republicans is something that Republicans have to actually give them, which is a sense of stability and solidity. And many Republicans are refusing to do that. I think that's what you're pointing out.
Did you trim Lily's service? Not yet. I will after
they're
I
thinking that
finish.
because they won 2020 and because they did better than expected in 2022, this means they now have a green light for their entire agenda. And that would be a wild misread of the tea leaves. If they decide that they're really going to double down on Elizabeth Warren-style modern monetary theory or something, they're going to blow out the spending. They're going to go soft on China, or they're going to steer in an extraordinarily environmentalist direction. Or
Hold on. Wait. I'm once I finish Vector, I'm going to be way more into politics so I can follow all of these claims better. But I feel like every single thing he just said there was like wrong. Hold on.
Style modern monetary theory or something. I'll misread of the tea leaves. If they decide that they're really going to double down on Elizabeth Warren-style modern monetary theory or something.
I feel like Biden is trying to do his best to rein in government spending, right? I feel like that's a big goal of his. Like trying to have like deficit neutral legislation passed is a pretty big deal. Trump didn't talk about deficit. Well, he talked about it when he was running for office, but Trump didn't get any deficit neutral legislation passed.
Something. They're going to blow out the spending. They're going to go soft on China. Or
what does go soft on China mean? Didn't the CHIPS Act that we just did, isn't that considered like a pretty significant blow to foreign semi-processor manufacturing? That the United States is going to start to manufacture a lot of semiconductors at home. I thought that was like a pretty big blow to like foreign investment in Chinese manufacturing plants and stuff. The CHIPS Act. So I don't know where this go soft on China means. Oh, Jesus. Oh, he was wrong on this poll too, or he was guessing, but in the US, 84% accept Trump as a legitimate president. I guess 16% not accepting is pretty bad, but even among Clinton voters, 76% accept him as a legitimate president. And that was one day after the election. That was the next day. On November 9th. Jesus. We're what, like 2 years from the last election? And it's like 65% of Republicans still think that the election was actually rigged? Sorry.
They're going to steer in an extraordinarily environmentalist direction, or they're going to move so.
I think that environmentalist direction that people are steering in is one that I think the public in general is pushing this, right? Like all of the big pipeline projects that have been canceled have been like politically popular. No? Am I wrong in thinking that? Like the Keystone XL pipeline, that shit was dead under fucking Obama. I thought that there's just been so many protests that like the general public is starting to pressure against this type of stuff more and more and more. I could be wrong on that. I don't know where like the polling is. Maybe people's feelings will change when energy prices go up, but I don't think that the American public is like more oil, more coal, more oil. Like I don't think that's where the public pressure is.
Socially liberal to the far extreme. If they do any of those things, they will get punished. It's just
but yeah, maybe that'll change as energy prices increase. I'm not sure.
Question of when they're going to get punished. So that's sort of I think where things stand.
I mean, I obviously I disagree with a lot of what you said there on the performance of Republican politicians in their respective states. The point I was making was a little bit more broad than just day-to-day politics, which is that I think what Trump has done to the trust in institutions, specifically in elections, is pretty irreparable. I think it's going to be around for election cycles to come, and I don't think it's comparable to what Democrats are.
I will say I don't think that that's true. That part I don't think is true. And the reason I don't think that's true is how fast did candidates, except for Kerry Lake, concede that they lost the elections?
That's fair. Yeah, that's definitely fair, but I'm talking more about the voting public.
Right,
So,
and you're not hearing from the, I mean, I'll take a
weigh.
poll. How many of you, I mean, you can be honest. I'm sure some of you think this. How many of you think that the election of 2022 was stolen? Like, show of hands. Not a ton of people. There's some.
That actually is a really good point. A very prescient point, I think is the word I'm looking for. Even though people were kind of talking about it, this is before an event takes place. Okay. No, not prescient. There was a lot of talk beforehand that the election was going to be rigged, but even though Republicans didn't do as well, I don't think you're hearing as much of that talk as like the elections were rigged, the elections were rigged, the elections were rigged. So, yeah, maybe without Trump cheerleading that, you don't get it as much, or it's not going to be a mainstay of the Republican Party, hopefully.
Okay, but statistically not super significant in a room of 1,000 people. Okay, so maybe they're scared because I said it, but you know,
60% of Republicans, according to polling, something like 50 to 70%.
Again, I'm saying that Trump is, the Trump election. Every poll about Trump is, if you ask a question that makes me feel bad about Trump, I will just tell you the opposite. That's every poll about Trump ever, right? They'll be like, they can ask literally anything. It'll be like, has Trump been married 3 times? And if it's asked by the New York Times, people be like, no, he has not been married 3 times. Ever. Yeah, in fact, he's married only once to Melania forever. Like Republicans will just tell the New York Times to stiff itself. I mean, that's really what it is. And so I think that a lot of those poll numbers, I'm not pretending that the phenomenon isn't real, it is real. But I do think it's transient. I think a lot of it is in reaction to people they think hate them. And that is going to have to come back together somehow. But I don't think that, I don't think that 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 8 years from now, barring Trump, right? I think Trump is a wild card in all this. Let's say there's another nominee, and the Republican nominee loses. Do I think it's going to be the same thing again? I don't. I don't think we saw it this time.
I mean, I disagree, but I don't want to take up any more
I
time.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Good job. Somebody is saying that majority of Democrats in at least one poll thought Trump was illegitimate shortly after. The problem was the next day was a problem a few months after the Russian collusion media cycle. A strong majority of registered voters say they don't believe Democrats have accepted that President Trump won the election fairly, or that he is a legitimate president. Wait. A strong majority of registered voters say they don't believe Democrats have accepted that President Trump won the election. Wait, what is that? What is it asking? The latest Harvard-Harris poll provided exclusively to The Hill, 68% of voters said Democrats have not accepted that Trump won fairly. 69% of Republicans said that, 69% of independents, and 65% of Democrats said that. Well, wait, is this for... Wait, what a weird question. This isn't saying if you've accepted him as a legitimate president. It's saying if you believe the Democrats have accepted you as a legitimate president, right? It's a strange question. I guess I can understand because they're trying to see where they think people are at on it, but